जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयोः श्रुत्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः. Let us visualize a scene where Sri Ramakrishna is sitting and one of his disciples is massaging his feet. Sri Ramakrishna asks the disciple, "Can you tell what your Lord is doing now?" Then the disciple is dumbfounded. He doesn't know what to speak. Then Sri Ramakrishna himself answers, "Your Lord is now trying to pass an elephant through the eye of a needle." Then the disciple understood that Sri Ramakrishna, out of compassion, was trying to pour spirituality into him. Later the disciple says that he was unlettered, he had no parents, but Guru Maharaj snatched him from the snares of the world and brought him near him. He gave him love, he gave him affection, and whatever he became was Guru Maharaj's miracle only. Sri Ramakrishna used to tell his disciples, always keep your mind pure, your mind should be spotless. If sometimes some impure thoughts torment your mind, always think of the Lord. Go and sit in front of the deity in the temple. If still your mind doesn't settle down, then come here, he used to tell, pointing to himself. The disciple was none other than Swami Adbhutananda, Latu Maharaj, whose birthday Tithi Puja we are celebrating today. Not much is known about his early days, because whenever someone used to ask Latu Maharaj about his pre-monastic days or previous life, he used to say, "Why to leave God and talk about an insignificant person like me? Don't forget that if you meditate on God, you will get blessings." So, and then the topic used to get diverted, and like that, none could get the details of his life, where he was, or his parents. Most of the spiritual giants we have seen were reticent about their previous days, and Latu Maharaj was no exception. But as far as we heard, he was born in Chhapra in Bihar. Belonged to a cowherd family. They were poor, and because of the family conditions, he had to come to Calcutta with his uncle, and there he joined as a servant in Ramchandra Datta, who was a devotee of Sri Ramakrishna in that family. After coming to Ramchandra Datta, there he heard about Sri Ramakrishna. He heard Sri Ramakrishna's name, and that desire came to his mind to know about Sri Ramakrishna. The first visit itself, Sri Ramakrishna, when Ramchandra Datta took Latu to Sri Ramakrishna says, "Oh, where did you get this boy? I see some holy signs in him." And he starts speaking to Latu about ever-free souls. Ever-free souls already are not bound by Maya. So when some inspiration they get, the spiritual fire ignites in them. Latu was no exception. So as Sri Ramakrishna touched his heart, touched his chest, then immediately his lips began to quiver, tears rolled down his cheeks, and he went into spiritual ecstasy at the first touch itself. This went on for an hour, and afterwards again when Sri Ramakrishna touched him, he regained normal consciousness. As frequently he went on visiting Guru Maharaj, first visit, second visit, third visit, the attraction towards Guru Maharaj went on increasing. It went to such an extent that he told, "I am not liking the job there." He used to work as a servant in Ramchandra Datta's family. "Now I will come here and I want to stay with you." Sri Ramakrishna says, "See, your coming here should not disturb your work. You can do whatever you work, but keep your mind on God. That is the secret of spirituality." But he was not a man to listen. He wanted to come and stay with Guru Maharaj. But Guru Maharaj says, "See, now 8 months I am going to come on Kukur. You continue there, and after some days, when I come back, then you can come and join me. After 8 months, Sri Ramakrishna comes back to Dakshineshwar, and Latu also comes and joins Sri Ramakrishna, and there starts his spiritual life under the guidance of Sri Ramakrishna. Sri Ramakrishna wanted all his disciples to be free from worldly attachments. Once Latu, as he was spotless, his mind, some of the spiritual traits of his mind we'll discuss afterwards, but he left Ramchandra Datta's house and joined Ramakrishna Deva. And then we see that he is serving him at Shampapur, at Kashipur, and rigorous spiritual discipline, at the same time serving Guru Maharaj. And in 1886, Swami Adbhutananda distributed 12 poker clothes through Sri Ramakrishna to all his brother disciples. And Latu also got initial sannyasa from Sri Ramakrishna only. In between, Latu had some wonderful visions. And afterwards, he tells to one of his disciples about one of his visions. He says he was sitting on the bank of the Ganga when he saw a light coming out of the waters of the river. It grew in size until at last it filled the sky, the earth, and the space between them. Inside that infinite effulgence, there were numberless other lights. He lost himself in ecstatic joy. The whole world was filled with bliss and bliss itself, and it can't be expressed in words. He says like this. In February 18, after Master passes away in 1886, and then he goes with Holy Mother to for pilgrimage, where he visits Vrindavan, and while their way, when coming back, they will go to Deoghar, Varanasi and Ayodhya. In February 1887, Ramchandra Datta's daughter passes away. She was caught by fire and she passes away. For this, Holy Mother sent Latu back, and after a few days again he comes back to Baranagar monastery, where he joins his other brother disciples. There he took the final vows of sannyasa. Swami Vivekananda named him as Swami Adbhutananda, who finds bliss in the wonderful nature of Atman. From 1886 to 1912, till he moved to Varanasi, we find him staying in Calcutta, nearby wherever the master used to visit, those places. He had no permanent home. And his life we can find in Song of Sannyasin poem. Swamiji writes, "Sky thy roof and grass thy bed, what chance may bring, well cooked or ill judge not." So his life was a living example of those lines. Till he came in 1903, till he joined Balaram Babu's house. He stayed there for continuously 8 years. He used to stay in various places. Whatever food he used to get, he used to manage with that. Meager living, he used to practice the total life of austerity. In between, on 4th July 1902, Swamiji passes away. That time he was in Balaram Bose's house. But he didn't go to Belur Math to pay his last respect to Swamiji. Many comments came, but he said, "I don't want to make a public display of my respect. I know Swamiji, how much he used to love me and how much respect I have for him. But it's whatever others may say. So much grief was there within him that he could not go." Then 1912, he leaves for Varanasi and never comes back again. He passes away in Varanasi only. Many physical ailments developed within him, mainly diabetes, and then some blister developed in his leg, which later transmitted into a gangrene. Though it was operated many times, but that was only the final cause of his death. And Latu Maharaj passes away on 24th April 1920. The Kathopanishad says, "Nayam atma pravachanena labhya nam vidhaya na bahuna shrutena." The self cannot be known through much study or through the intellect or through much learning. It can be known through the self alone that the aspirant prays to. And Latu Maharaj's life was a living example of this Vedic dictum. Now in the following paragraphs, we shall discuss some unique traits which helped a shepherd boy to become a saint. First was his simplicity. Sri Ramakrishna used to say that simplicity, one becomes simple out of Lord's grace, and it is due to the previous birth samskaras. Simplicity is a virtue one attains after many lives of severe austerity, and that simple-mindedness takes one easily to God. Latu was so simple that he would speak of all his weakness and shortcomings to the master, who used to guide him accordingly. In fact, it was his simplicity and guilelessness that opened the door to spirituality for him. There are ample incidents that display his simplicity. We'll take one or two of them. As his visits to Sri Ramakrishna increased, then one day he says to Ramchandra Datta's wife, "Mother, I want to, this job I am not liking it. I want to go and stay with Sri Ramakrishna and serve him." Then Rambabu's wife asked him, "But who will feed you? Who will clothe you there?" "Why? I shall take the temple prasad that is offered in the temple, and you will give me a cloth to wear." Then Rambabu's wife asks him, "But if you are not working here, why shall we give a cloth?" Then the boy answers, "Why? Rambabu loves me. Will he not give me a cloth?" Listening to this, mother laughs. Rambabu's wife laughs, smiles at the innocence and simplicity of the boy. Once again we see, one day Latu comes from Rambabu's house in Dakshineshwar. That time master was not present in Dakshineshwar. He had gone to Kamarpur. It was afternoon time. Ramlal, the master's, Sri Ramakrishna's nephew, was present. So he informed Latu, "See, master is not there now, Sri Ramakrishna, you can't meet him." But Latu says, "No, Sri Ramakrishna is always, ever present in Dakshineshwar, and anyone who called on him would see him." Holding steadfastly to this idea, the boy sat there from midday until evening. Ramlal Dada went on persuading, "See, he is not there," but boy continued. And because the Vesper time, Vesper service was there, so Ramlal Dada leaves. After evening Arati, when Ramlal Dada comes out, he sees the same boy there. He brings some prasad and tells, wanted to give to him. But he sees the boy going down to someone. Then he asks, after giving the prasad, the boy asks, "Where did Ramakrishna go?" Latu is asking, "Where was Ramakrishna? Where is Ramakrishna?" Ramlal Dada was amazed. He could not say anything. But we can understand that how he ultimately came to Sri Ramakrishna with his simplicity and steadfastness, devotion. Then we'll take another aspect of a spiritual aspirant which is very much important for spiritual progress: purity. Only the pure in heart can see God. In all religious scriptures, it's the same. It's the same view is expressed. And Latu's purity was attested by Sri Ramakrishna himself. After meeting the master, Latu was longing to stay at Dakshineshwar and serve him. In June 1881, Hridaya leaves Sri Ramakrishna. So master wanted someone to be near him, and Latu continues. He says to Rambabu himself, "See, this boy is pure. Please let him be here, and he also wants to be here." After some days, he sees Latu meditating somewhere near the bank of the Ganges. He calls Latu. "On whom are you meditating?" "You are meditating on Divine Mother." And the same mother, that time Holy Mother, was staying in Nahabat, and there she has no one to serve her, to help her. And Sri Ramakrishna takes Latu to Holy Mother, says, "This boy is pure by nature. He will be with you. He will serve you." Mother also was very shy. She was not very freely mixing with any of the other brother disciples, but Latu had free access to Holy Mother. And Sri Sharada Devi too would converse freely with him. The third point which we will take up is service and obedience to the Master. Guru, you can say Guru Seva. So, Latu heard from Ramchandra Datta in the beginning itself that God sees into the mind of a man without concern for what he is or where he is. He who yearns for God and wants none other than God, to such a man God reveals himself. One should call on him with a simple and innocent heart. Without sincerely longing, none can see God. One should pray to him in solitude and weep for him. Only then will God bestow his mercy. These words were an eye-opener for Latu. His full spiritual life was built on the edifice of these words, you can say. Latu's life exemplifies how service to the Guru leads to God realization. One day, in the evening at Dakshineshwar, Sri Ramakrishna finds Latu sleeping. He rebukes him. This is the time for evening devotion and you are sleeping now. Many other disciples or any common man would have heard this rebuke and would have forgotten for the rest of his life. But Latu was not that. Once he heard that, for the next part of his life, he totally left sleeping at night. So much that he kept the Guru's words as the injunction. Afterwards we find that when he was in Baranagar, his health broke down, he was suffering by pneumonia. Doctors told him you should lie on the bed, you should not tax yourself. But when the time for evening devotion came, then he says, no, it is the Master's direction, what does the doctor know about it? In his half Bengali, half Hindi accent, he says, हमने अतुशा तो जाने ना, ये तार हुकुम, हमने तार हुकुम मैंने चलबे. Hukum is not fully Bengali, is a word which says, it's his injunction, and I am following his words. Whatever others says, I have to follow whatever Master had taught me. The next was his rigorous spiritual practice. Someone in Varanasi asked Latu Maharaj, Maharaj, you have served Sri Ramakrishna, you were with him, but at this age also we find you are so much indulged in sadhana, you do so much spiritual practices regularly. Then he says that serving with Sri Ramakrishna or being with him is not the criteria to get God's grace. To get God's grace, one has to practice a lot of spiritual sadhana. So we can understand in our position when Latu Maharaj, such a person who used to day, night, whole night he used to meditate, if he says like this. Sharat Maharaj recollects that Latu never used to sleep at night. At night, whenever in the beginning he used to pretend to sleep, he even used to snore. But afterwards, he used to start counting his beats. It used to so happen that as soon as the lights were put off, some sound used to come, some trickling sound. So Sharat Maharaj first thought it may be a mouse or something. 2-3 times he did a rap sound and it stopped. But he had a slight doubt that it may not be a mouse, it might be something else. So next day, whenever that sound came, he was very alert and he lights a matchstick immediately. And he found Latu sitting on the bed and counting his beats. Because such was Latu Maharaj. He never wanted to make a public display or public show of his spiritual practices. Shashi Maharaj also recollects that they had to call Latu again and again back to normal consciousness and in a way force some food into his mouth. Many such days passed when all of us took our food, having called him again and again, but having got no response, we placed his food in his room and came away. Noon passed, evening came and went, and night, when we entered the room to call him for the night food, we found the same food lying there and Latu lying down in the same posture covered all over with a thick cotton chadar. That was the way he used to meditate. To force a little food down through his throat, we had to take recourse to many devices. Girish Babu says, Girish Chandra Ghosh says to one devotee, if you want to see a monk as described in the second chapter of the Gita, we find Sthitapragya Lakshana that I mentioned. Go and see Latu Maharaj. You will see the personification of those shlokas. He used to practice a lot of sadhana in the bank of river Ganges. At that time he would tie some dry grain in the corner of his towel and keep it dipped in the waters of the Ganga. The point is, as time passed, that grains will become soft, and after his meditation he will take those grains. One day it so happened he carried some grains in the corner of his towel, dipped it into the Ganges, kept one brick above it and sat for meditation. That time it was ebb tide. As he went into meditation, he lost outer consciousness, and after some time flood tide came. Where was the grain? Where was the cloth? Nothing was to be seen. But he sat there motionless. After some time, again, when ebb tide came, the cloth and the grains were intact there. He takes it, opens it, and starts eating them. One night, it is incident of December 1900, when Swami Vivekananda returns from the West after his second visit. He is in Belur Math, he comes to Belur Math suddenly, and all brother disciples, as we know, originally, commonly when someone known comes after a long time, we sit with him, we talk to him, we exchange our ideas. So, all brother disciples met Swami Vivekananda, but Latu was not to be seen. So one disciple ran to Latu Maharaj, was sitting on the bank of the Ganges there in Belur Math and meditating. He went and informed, Maharaj, Swami Vivekananda has come, will you not like to meet him? Latu Maharaj says, Arey, sit here, see, Ganga is so pleasant, so calm, try to meditate. But disciple didn't listen to him, he went away. After food, Swami Vivekananda comes out, he himself comes to meet Latu Maharaj and asks, are you angry with me? Why you didn't come to meet me? No, my mind wanted to be here, so I was here. I liked it. Very nice. So after some time, he exchanging some few talks with him, Swami Vivekananda retires to the room and Latu continues sitting there. The disciple, when next day at 4 o'clock he was leaving for Calcutta, he came to that bank and he saw Latu Maharaj in the same posture sitting. It was 4 o'clock. Next point, complete reliance on God. We see in Latu Maharaj that how he never expected some things. As Sri Krishna says in the Gita, Ananyas chintayan tomam ye jana parupyasate desham nityabhyuktanam yogakshemam bahamyam. To those who worship me and meditate upon me with undistracted minds, being ever devoted to me, I supply all their needs. An absolute dependence on Sri Ramakrishna was the essence of Latu Maharaj's life. He once observed, how could an ignorant person like him undertake severe austerities after Sri Ramakrishna's passing away? It was, one day he was sitting on a boat and the boat left anchored. He didn't know about it at all, till it reached Dakshineshwar. As it reached Dakshineshwar, he came down the boat and there Ramlal Dada fed him sumptuously. Then he comes back walking. Like that, another day, whole night he used to spend on the bank of the Ganges. Once it so happened that it suddenly started raining and some train wagon used to be parked in the station. The railway line is there, so there it was there. And so as it was raining, Latu Maharaj, to take shelter, to escape from the rain, he went and sat in the railway wagon. And as usual, he went into meditation, and after some time that railway wagon was connected to the engine and it went on to Chitpur. It was Bagh Bazar and he went to Chitpur, quite far away, maybe 3-4 kilometers. Next morning the porters come and ask, you have to vacate. Then he asks where he is, he's in Chitpur. He comes down, again walks back to Bagh Bazar. From that time onwards he stopped boarding railway wagons. He used to sit in some corners during the rains. One day, this incident took place in Basumati Press. One day at midnight, suddenly the workers heard some shout. he used to stay in that press and he used to love those workers also during that period when he used to roam as vagabond. So suddenly he shouts, hearing him roaring like that, those of the press people come out. He says, "Shut up, devil, you threaten me. Who I am a child of Sri Ramakrishna. All your tricks and threats are of no avail. हमके तुई हुमकी देखाबी, हमने रामकृष्णेर संतान, हमार काछे ओसब चालाकी चलबे ना." He says, "I am Sri Ramakrishna's disciple. You try to," means others when they came and asked Latu Maharaj what has happened, but he didn't tell anything. Only they saw him sitting in Virasana and his eyes were blown as if what we understood is he felt some temptation or something, as it is common. If we turn the pages of history, we will see in life of Buddha, in other spiritual giants' life also, like these temptation comes and how he faced it. The pure, we can understand that from anyone's, if he has not so much faith, these words will not come out like this. He had indefinite love for scriptures. Though he couldn't read himself, but at the mid of night, suddenly he told one day to Suddhanandaji, that was Swamiji's disciple, "Can you read out Bhagavad Gita for me?" And he read out. And one day he went to listen to Kathopanishad, some explanation was going on lectures on Kathopanishad, and there, as that line comes, "Pravrihan munjadi veshikam dhairyena," which means, with deep patience, soul should be taken out of the body, like taking out of the soft innermost fiber from the rest of the munja grass. And immediately Latu Maharaj starts, "Oh Sudhir, thik boleche, Pandit thik boleche." He says, Sudhir was Shuddhan's name, so he says, Sudhir, Pandit has told correctly. So before it was rendered to Bengali, Latu Maharaj wanted to speak about other language, Sanskrit he didn't knew at all. So as soon as Pandit explained the words, he told, before explaining itself, he told that it's correct, Pandit has told correctly, because he has already experienced that in his life. So he could firmly say, "Oh, what Pandit is telling is correct." He used to say, listening to scriptures has a greater impact than listening to lectures, reading scriptures. Because when you listen to a lecture or something, a temporary connection is developed between a speaker and the audience. But when you go through scriptures, a permanent bond falls and it has a long-standing effect. So he had a lot of love for the scriptures. Latu Maharaj, once Sri Ramakrishna blessed Latu Maharaj that a time will come when Vedas and Vedanta will flow from your mouth. And it was true. At the end of his fag end of his life, we find many devotees used to come with some problems and how he used to explain them. With very simple things, how he used to elevate their minds. Once it so happened that some of his devotees, disciples had visited Belur Math with his friends. One devotee had gone to Belur Math with his friend and he comes back and meets Sri Ramakrishna. Then Sri Ramakrishna asks, "So when you bowed down to Sri Ramakrishna, did you give any money?" Then the disciple says, "Yes, I gave." Then he turned to his other friends, "Did all of you give?" Then they said, "No." Then Latu Maharaj comments, "Oh, that means you want your post to reach the person by bearing post." All of them couldn't understand immediately. Then Latu Maharaj explains, that means you want to practice pity, you want to practice charity without spending money. Sri Ramakrishna always used to insist, whenever you visit a holy place, try to give some money. Otherwise you commit a sin. Once again we find that topic discussion came on charity. And Latu Maharaj says that it's not easy to understand the difficulties of poor. If you are poor, then only you can understand the difficulties of poor. Then he says that, see, many rich people are there, but how many people they donate their money for charity? They become selfish. They think of their own ends. And again, those who have money, they don't feel the inclination to give. So, both having money and the having the inclination to give needs Lord's grace. It is indeed a rare phenomenon. Riches increases person's vanity and he takes him away from the Lord, and farther he is away from the Lord, the pitiable is his condition. We should never measure a man's poverty by the wealth he has, but to know how far he is from God. Nearer the Lord, the richer the man. More forgetful of him, poorer and unhappier he is. One day, a disciple of Raja Maharaj asked Latu Maharaj, Maharaj, you have all seen God. Now tell us what you have understood about this world. Latu Maharaj gives a nice example, that if we keep a jug of water away from a pond or a river, the water of the jug dries up. But if it is kept dipped in the tank of the river, the water inside the jug remains as full as ever. Similarly, if we can keep our mind ever dipped in the blissful Lord, the wind of worldliness cannot dry our mind of its bliss. It remains ever full of bliss. And then the second question asked was, does the world appear to be a burden? Latu Maharaj answers, when you take a dip in the Ganges, over your head there is such a heavy load of water, but do you feel it? Similarly, in this world of the Lord, if you take a dip in Him, you will not feel the weight of the world. The world sets divinized. It becomes His, saturated by Him to the core. Now the burden appears heavy because it is cut off from the Lord. It is pure matter. But when spiritualized, it loses its weight. One devotee came to Latu Maharaj. He had committed some mistakes and he was feeling ashamed. So Latu Maharaj himself called him and asks, see, Swami Vivekananda used to say that we feel that when we commit a mistake, so much we feel embarrassed. Then Swami Vivekananda used to say, what is this stain of an inkpot of sin? In His infinite ocean of mercy, if one bathes in the stain of such 100 ink spots of sin, would be washed away beyond recognition. So redouble your sadhana and try to think of Lord. But still the devotee was not very confident. Then Latu Maharaj says, see, when you indulge in sin, then you are ashamed. But such is Maya that after committing the sin also one feels ashamed. When you have done the sin, then already you know God has seen, the Almighty. You can't escape His eyes. He has already seen the mistakes you have done. After doing again, why to feel ashamed? You better redouble your sadhana, keep your mind in God, and sometimes visit holy places. Thus, hearing these words, the devotee's strength revived and he engaged himself in sadhana. Thus, Latu Maharaj could instill hope and courage into the drooping hearts and inspired them to greater sadhana. Someone asked Latu Maharaj, Maharaj, why Lord's grace does not fall on us? Then he answers, it is because we place our intellect and egoism above Him. We are not prepared to wait for His commands. We lose patience in a minute, replied Latu Maharaj. Actually, there are many such incidents and many interesting incidents to discuss, but our time is short. So one more simple anecdote I will tell. He used to often tell his disciples a small poem that he had heard from Sri Ramakrishna. I'll first tell the Bengali of it. Jage joge jege thakbi, ঘুমের কালে তাকে ডাকবি, কাজের মাঝে তাকে ধরবি, আর হরদম তার সেবায় লাগবি. Jage joge jege thakbi means always be alert. Always try to keep your mind on God. That is jage joge jege thakbi. ঘুমের কালে তাকে ডাকবি. That means it can be interpreted in two ways. One is when you feel asleep, when you feel tamasic, then you remember God. Or try to meditate on God at the silence at the dead of night. Kajer maje take dakbi. That means whenever you are indulged in work, try to remember Him. But any work you do, that will not bring egotism. Hardam tar shebay lagbi. And try not to waste, we shall try not to waste a single moment, because life is so precious. We shall always try that we can serve the Lord. We can do some good for us and for the society. Swami Vivekananda, one comment, one quote is there about what he says about Latu Maharaj, and that explains Swami Adbhutananda's life. He says, if we compare the surroundings out of which Latu came with ours, and his spiritual achievements again with ours, we should have to admit that he is far superior to us. We are all born in noble families, or are all well educated, and came to master with sharpened intellect. Latu was completely illiterate. When meditation seemed monotonous, we could remove it by studies. Latu had no such alternative. He had but one support throughout his life: the fact that he could keep his head in spite of these adverse circumstances, and had the supreme spiritual realization shows the inner strength of his personality and the infinite grace of Master on him. So we pray to Sri Ramakrishna, Holy Mother Sharda Devi and Swami Vivekananda to bestow the simplicity, the purity, the love for God and complete reliance on Him as Latu Maharaj had on this sacred day. Om Niranjanam Nityam Anantarupam Bhaktanukampatrita Vigraham Vai Ishavataram Parameshamikhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirasa Namama. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.